Welcome to the 2024 Inovalon Intern Takeover Fireside Chat. Did you know that companies with highly engaged employees outperform their competitors by 147%? Join us today as we explore how Inovalon fosters a positive company culture to drive success. My name is Noelani, and I'm the content marketing intern with Inovalon this summer. Today, my colleague and I will be speaking with Sara, the Chief People Officer. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to my colleague to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Raystrick, and I am the Corporate Communications Intern this summer here at Inovalon. Welcome, Sara. We're excited to have you join us today for the 2024 Intern Takeover Fireside Chat. To get started, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, your role at Inovalon, and what brought you here?
Sure, yeah. My name is Sara DeBella, and I'm the Chief People Officer. I've been with Inovalon for almost a year now, and I was really excited about the opportunity because of the transformation that the company is going through. I've been in other organizations going through change and transformation and know that having a really well-oiled HR machine can help to make that process run much more effectively. And so I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to the two of you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. What are some of the most important skills for success in your role?
Sure. So I think that there are kind of three that first come to mind. The first is influence. And so working in HR, especially as an HR leader, understanding how to influence and help people to see different perspectives is critical. I think also having subject matter expertise within HR is key. So knowing how compensation and talent acquisition and how talent development, how all of those kind of core functions within HR all work together. And then the last one that I'll mention is understanding the business that you're in and how HR can really impact that business and the business strategy. For most companies, the people are what really drive all of the outcomes. And so linking your talent to your business strategy is pretty key. So those are the three that I think are pretty critical to be successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. What are the biggest challenges you've faced in your role so far?
So that's one where I was reflecting on that. I feel like within HR, there's a lot of, I'll call it gray space. It's not like always black and white, and it's definitely not a part of the organization where one size is going to fit every problem. And so things that have worked really well, say at a previous company or even a different time at the same company, may not work for a future state problem. And so really understanding that gray space and being able to navigate within it and make the right recommendation for the right moment, I think is a pretty big challenge.
Of course. So, a big part of a successful company is to maintain positive company culture. So, Rachel and I wanted to ask you today, what role do you play as a leader in shaping and maintaining the company culture?
Yeah, so I mean, traditionally, HR has played a really critical role in shaping culture, and we do that by implementing policies, programs, practices, et cetera, that reinforce the values that a company has. But I will say that I think that COVID has really changed how leaders interact with employees. We need to be much more flexible and adaptable. I think the pandemic really showed us that having that very top-down type of working environment is not quite as effective. And so people need to be inspired more now. And so the company culture is really critical. When you think about all of the high-profile crises that have happened at companies over the past couple of years, those are largely culturally related. And it's also intensified efforts around DE&I, and so that people feel that they can bring their best and their whole self to work. And then there's a continuing battle for talent. So all that to say, while HR still plays a very critical role because of how work has changed over the last few years, I don't think you can just compartmentalize it within HR. And so I'll kind of end this point with saying that I think that everyone has to be responsible for driving culture and making the organization have a culture that is the one that we want. HR is still really key, but I think as leaders, we all play a really big role in making sure that the culture is the one that we want it to be and not the one that just happens.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially on your point of the pandemic really changing the way that we communicate with one another. So that leads me to our next question. How do you ensure that employees feel included and valued within the organization?
That's one where, so if I think about the role of HR, as an HR leader, that's really kind of key for what I can help to do. So thinking about what are the tools that we could have, what are the programs, what are the ways that we want to communicate and make people feel rewarded and recognized. Right now, as an example, my team and I are leading a process to look at different vendors to bring in some software so that we can make it a less manual and more visible process. And so as an HR leader, I play a really key role in making sure that recognition and rewards, that we've got a process for it, that it's reinforced, that hopefully it's easy to do. And then personally, so I feel like you can never say thank you enough. And I try to make sure that for my team, I'm giving out public praise and recognition regularly. Not everyone likes to be praised publicly. So I think also understanding how your team wants to be recognized is key. And so I think, on a personal note, saying thank you to people. I had a leader who it didn't matter what it was, he would always say thank you. And then I've had other leaders who, you toil away at something and you send them this thing that you've been working on, and you really don't get much feedback on it. So it definitely makes an impact, and it impacted me personally. And so I've taken that with me as an HR leader to make it easier and more of the fabric of who we are and how we interact with our employees, to make recognition something that everyone understands is important to do.
That's awesome. That's great insight. Thank you, Sarah. We actually had a viewer in our comments ask a question. Margaret asked, what trends do you see shaping the future of work, and how is Inovalon preparing for them?
I think one of the key trends with the future of work is having people leaders becoming even more empathetic and more human in the way that they lead. I think that being able to relate to workers is really key. I mean, particularly workers that are earlier in their careers, being able to understand like what motivates people, how to think about those kind of, I'll call them softer skills. Those are really critical. What I've seen in a lot of technology companies is you promote individuals that are really great technical contributors, and they might not have the skills and capabilities to motivate and just get the best out of their teams. And so that's something that I see. And so we've been focused at Inovalon on helping all leaders at really all levels of the organization understand just how to be more effective. And it normally doesn't come down to like, oh, you need to be a better time manager per se. It's really about how do you motivate, inspire, speak to people, be more human and authentic so that you can really motivate the best performance out of people. More of those intangibles.
I totally agree with you. Kind of going off of that previous question, how do you specifically support employee growth and development to foster a more positive work culture?
Sure. So I think about this two different ways. So one is at kind of the organizational level. So my role as the Chief People Officer, I have a ton of ability to influence how we think about growth and development. So as an example, job architecture and career pathing. If you're an employee and you're starting kind of in your first job, there's always that kind of bewilderment I've seen with employees around, okay, so how do I get from the job that I'm in to the next job? What are the skills? What are the experiences? And so the first part of that is to have a job architecture. And what that means is there's a defined kind of, this is the first step that you're able to be a part of the company. Here's what's next to it. Here's what's on the other side of it. And then kind of moving up that career ladder. And so understanding what does that look like as a career ladder perspective, and then what are the paths to get there. So I understand that if I come in, I start as an associate. If I want to move to a junior associate, what do I need to do to make that a reality in terms of building the right skills and capabilities to get there? So that's one piece. So feel very strongly, the last few organizations I've been a part of, having a defined job architecture with career pathing is something that has been an area of focus. We've worked on it for a while at Inovalon, still have a lot of work to do, but I think we've got a good kind of starting point. On a personal note, I am willing to really take risks on individuals who are driven and engaged. And so by that, what does that mean? At my level, typically there are very high level roles reporting to me. So like maybe executive vice president or a senior vice president or a vice president. I usually will gravitate towards hiring roles that are maybe more mid-career, people who have all the skills and capabilities but are hungry to do more, and so maybe a director level or even maybe earlier in career than that, because I am willing to take the time to invest in people if they want to learn and grow, because I found that those individuals have a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas, a lot of passion. And so for me personally, taking a risk on someone who is fully qualified for the role that they're applying for, but maybe it's a level or two below maybe what some of my other peers at my level would be hiring for to report to them, because I think it's worth the time, and it teaches me too about things that are maybe earlier in career that I haven't thought about. Or so two things. One, at the company level, job architecture, career pathing, feel really passionate about that. And then on a personal note, for those who report to me and on my team, kind of taking a risk, and risk probably isn't the right word, but being willing to hire someone who is maybe a few levels lower than maybe someone might imagine would be needed reporting to a chief people officer, because I want to invest the time to help someone develop in their career.
That's great insights. We're going to move on into exploring some qualities that you may be looking for in emerging young professionals like us.
Okay.
So my first question being, what are some strategies you've learned to build success in our field?
So the first thing that I would say is don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm a very inquisitive person. My significant other, my husband, always makes fun of me because I always have 1,000 questions. But at work, I was sometimes reluctant to use my voice and to ask them. And then as I advanced in my career, I realized everyone has a lot of questions and not everyone asks them. And oftentimes I will ask a question and someone will say, oh yeah, I was wondering the same thing. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Be thoughtful about how you do it, but don't be afraid. There are really no dumb questions. And I would say 9 times out of 10, if you have a question, someone else has that same question. So that would be the first point. I think also don't be afraid to make yourself useful. And by that, I mean, I did a number of very non-glamorous assignments earlier in my career that, there was work that needed to be done and maybe no one else wanted to do it, but it positioned me to be able to get something maybe a little bit more glamorous down the road, because I learned something new. I got a skill or experience that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So don't be afraid, make yourself useful, raise your hand to do those unglamorous things. And then the last point that I'll say is stay curious. I think at all stages in your career, there is just an abundance of information, new things to learn, people to meet. Really just stay open and be curious, keep reading and connect with people. So those are the 3 things that I feel are helpful to be successful.
I love that. I loved your point of stay curious. I think that is just great advice and great insight for just emerging professionals like myself. Just to piggyback off of that, in your experience, what key qualities and traits do you believe are essential for effective leadership and why?
So I think the first is being a good communicator. People need to understand the mission. They need to know, why are we doing this? What are we doing? And so really being able to verbally communicate in written form clearly and crisply so that people understand what's happening, how they're doing, what your expectations are. I think that is really, really key. It's probably the most important element. Maybe second, or maybe coming in neck and neck with that first one, is having empathy and being able to build relationships. I think it's critical for leaders to understand what motivates people. Everyone's so different and you can't treat everyone the same, and you really need to think about, if I were in that person's shoes, what's the best way to get the best work out of that person? What are they motivated by? What are they thinking about? What is going to help them to do their best? And so I think having empathy and having that ability to build relationships is really key. And then the last one is stamina. And so when I was in business school, I learned, it was a long time ago. And I remember that there was an article that I read, and I don't remember the exact article, but it talked about leaders and having a lot of energy. And I had my first job out of my MBA program with a gentleman named Joe Rosetto, who was my boss. And I just thought, this guy never sleeps. He worked all the time. He worked so hard. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to be a leader and keep up that pace. And so that sort of made me nervous initially in my career. what I've translated that into, though, is stamina for the work. And what that means is I really love the work that I do. I'm super engaged mentally. I may not be able to like never sleep. I do require a normal amount of sleep. But having stamina, that mental stamina for the work, having that energy to do the job, for me, I think is really critical. So it's kind of like, I guess, loving what you do is kind of all encompassed in that. So that's the third thing that I feel like is important as a leader. There's a lot to do. There's never a dull moment. And so having that energy to keep doing it, I think is pretty critical.
I completely agree. And just at Inovalon, I think we all can agree there's always something to do. But that leads us to our next question. What traits do you look for when considering candidates to join your team?
Well, I mean, obviously, I want someone who's qualified, who has the skills and capability to do the work. But above and beyond that, I want to, when I'm interviewing, I always think about like, is this someone that I would want to spend time with? Are they nice? I don't want to work with people that are unkind and not nice to work with. And so having that, just niceness, being a nice person. I know it's hard to evaluate, and anyone on the live stream who's like a hiring expert with some hiring criteria. I know it's hard to quantify that, but a little bit more of a gut feeling of like, is this someone who I would want to spend time with? And then lastly, I look for people that have a history of hard work and diligence, and I think you can see that even just looking at someone's resume, and are there typos on it? Do they jump around a lot? So I mean, there's always reasons why maybe someone comes with some exceptions, but I want to find someone who is giving me the sense of diligence and being a hard worker is nice, and I would want to spend time with them, and people who are well qualified for the roles.
Well, kind of going off of that, when it comes to the hiring process in your career and what you've seen, we had a comment come in from Joe asking, can you comment on authenticity and transparency in one's organization? How important are these concepts and how do you achieve them?
When I thought about the question around leadership qualities, authenticity was one of I tend to think in threes. I find that's like the easiest way to communicate. And that was one of the ones that I did feel like should certainly make a top five. Being authentic, I think it's helps you to be more engaging with your team, and really, I mean, we're all humans, we're all people. And so I think for leaders, and not to keep harping on COVID, but I think COVID really did show us that like leaders that are empathetic and authentic, they really are getting better outcomes. I think they're like, if you look at organizations that with highly engaged leaders, there's much more, the revenues are higher, the turnover is lower. So there's a lot of data points out there that I think help to support that leadership style of authenticity, making sure that you're connecting with people on a human level. For me, I find it helps because I just want to be honest with people. Like if I'm having a bad day, or I'm just feeling frazzled, or I'm really happy about something, I want to be able to share that with the people around me. I mean, not being able to be who you are, it's hard. It's not good for people. It's not good for your work and for I think making a productive workplace. And then I think being able to share who you are helps to drive engagement, because you can bring your full self to work.
We also had another question come in that I think goes right along with this topic, and I really wanted to bring it to your attention. So Ren asked, first of all, they said really great points so far. My question for you all is, what advice would you give to future interns on how to stand out and fully take advantage of their internship opportunity at Inovalon?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, maybe I might have to defer back to the two of you for any insights. But so what I would say is, and this is something that we told our intern class, was don't be afraid to use the experiences with any leader that's here. So what I mean by that is, if there's someone you want to talk to, we all have an open door. Don't think that there's anyone who is unwilling or disinterested in meeting with you. The interns have brought a ton of energy, new ideas. Just really infused a lot of great life into things, and so we're grateful for that. And for anyone in the organization to be able to share back to the interns so that you're all successful, that's something that we want to do. So I think take advantage of the ability to interact with people at different levels, ask questions. If you have an observation or a good idea, I mean, we're here for it. So take advantage of the opportunity to the fullest. We're here to support you. We want you to be successful because you're helping us.
I completely agree with that. And as an intern, from our perspective, everybody is so helpful and willing to connect with us. So scheduling coffee chats is so helpful in making meaningful connections. And it allows you to let other people know what your strengths are so they can advocate for you as well.
I totally agree with you, Rachel. Another question is, do you have any tips for getting ready for a public speaking engagement? How do you manage to stay calm and composed during the presentation?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not naturally a very calm and composed public speaker. I have definitely been practicing it. I remember the first town hall that I did, I was so nervous. I don't even remember what I know that I got there and I did it, and then it was all a blur. For me, being calm I'm able to do that by being really well prepared. And so making sure you really know your material, knowing how you're going to transition and go from point to point. And so just practicing, preparing. I'm a big, gotta put in the work kind of person. I don't just show up and, everything's just effortlessly rolling. I put in a lot of thought and try to be really prepared. I would also say that in terms of pre-work, I did take a public speaking class, and there was I don't know if it was a class, it was like a training, and having your power statement and getting big. So that's something that I've done before, where you just get big in the mirror, and maybe it seems silly, but sometimes you just need to psych yourself up, and having that power statement that you say to yourself in the bathroom all by yourself, it can work.
I completely agree. I feel like there's no such thing as being over prepared. But moving on, can you share with us a lesson you learned from a mistake or a misstep in your leadership journey, and what advice would you give to someone that might be avoiding making a similar mistake?
Sure. So kind of going back to my earlier point around communication, I think assuming that people understand you, it is a mistake. And it's one that I've made a few times where, there's something critical or a big project, or even something smaller, that you haven't communicated it clearly, or maybe the person just heard you differently. And so I really try to make sure when I'm talking to my team or when we're introducing something new, just really making sure that you restate what you've just gone through, sending a follow-up, outlining it. But I would say miscommunication is something that I see. I see that even kind of as I step back and looking at, as there are problems around me at work that we try to solve for in HR. Just that misunderstanding between people is really, it's pretty common. And so making sure people really understand, asking them to repeat it back, having a follow-up, I feel like that can help to alleviate that.
Definitely. What is the one piece of advice you would give to us interns as we start our professional careers?
I would say to take everything as a learning experience. Don't look at it as a mistake, or if you make a mistake. I'm just not assuming everyone makes mistakes, but if you do make a mistake, take it as a learning experience. Or as you're doing something and you feel oh, you know what, I really didn't love working on this project. This is not the kind of work I want to do. Great. Now you know, and you don't need to try not to do it again. And so really take it. I'm very much a person of everything that you do builds you to be the person who you are at that moment, and it's all just, it builds on it. So take it all as a learning experience and try to figure out, okay, so I did this, it wasn't what I expected, what would I do differently? And don't take it to heart. I mean, you have a long career, you have plenty of years to make lots of mistakes. Don't take it too personally. If you do something and you find out that it wasn't the right way or the right fit, or you didn't like the outcome, great, learn from it, and you can grow from there.
100%. Great advice. Now, moving on from interns to new hires and employees, we had in our comment section, Destiny had asked, how can new employees contribute to and enhance Inovalon's culture from day 1?
So that is a great question. I think that new employees are such a wonderful infusion of like new perspectives, because I've been here a year now, and I think even in a year's time, I start, you get into the like, this is the way we do it. So I think having new ideas with solutions, or like observations and solutions, is really critical. I think it's important, especially on teams where maybe there's been a long tenured team working together. You kind of get into a way of working, and usually it's pretty successful. But I mean, there's always ways to like think differently, be more effective, automate something. And so having that fresh perspective, I think, is really important. But being able to come with, here's an idea, like don't come with a problem, but like come with an idea. I've got this observation. This isn't working well. Have we thought about this? So that's a consideration as a new hire to add value kind of pretty quickly.
I completely agree. Just moving on to a couple rapid fire questions just about you.
Okay.
What was your first job?
Oh, very unglamorous. I worked in a hospital cafeteria. It was terrible. Definitely big learning experience.
For sure. Moving on, what motivates you?
So I feel very fortunate to have come from a wonderful mother and father and family, and I just feel so lucky to be in the crossroads of who I am and where I am. And so that makes me want to just like do my very best and make the most of my circumstances. I also feel strongly about being able to give back and help others. And so taking what I've learned and being able to translate that into helping other people is really motivating to me. I want my mom and dad to be proud of me.
Me too. What software do you use most during the workday?
Oh, I feel like most of my job is just, I'm an emailer. Outlook. I don't know that that's a software per se. I've had to use a software. I don't know. That's a good question. We'll leave it with Outlook.
Sounds about right. What is your best remote work tip?
So I think it's important to have a routine, but getting a little bit more, I'm going to like show my my advancement in my professional journey here. Put on a nice shirt and comb your hair. You should look like you're at work. I appreciate remote work. We're all just working from home, but like, look like you're working. That's like the old person in me. But I think importantly, like if I rise above it professionally, have a routine. It's good to have a routine and stick with it. That way you kind of get into the mechanics of like, this is when I start, this is, when I end the day, and have a routine.
Exactly. What non-existent job do you wish existed?
If there was ever a need to be a professional pizza taste tester, I would sign up for that. I wouldn't even need to be paid for it. I would just do it pro bono.
I wish that was my job. That would be so fun. What is the best advice you've ever received?
So it comes from my dad. He carried this quote around in his wallet from when he was working that he got from his dad. He had cut it out of the newspaper a long, long time ago, and he had it in his wallet, and he made it for me on a plaque. And it's essentially, be persistent. It's a bit longer. There's a little bit more to it, but that's essentially it. Be persistent. That's the one thing that's going to help you to stand out from everyone else. Smart people, rich people, people with all different kinds of qualities. Be persistent and keep doing your best, and good things will come your way.
I love that. Honestly, I feel like I need to write that down and carry that with me. That's such a good quote and mantra. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sara, and sharing your valuable insights and all your advice. Your story is truly inspiring, and I know that it's helped myself and Rachel, and I'm sure it will help others succeed.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and we appreciate each and everyone for tuning in with us today. Don't forget to follow Inovalon on LinkedIn to catch more of our upcoming live sessions and stay updated with the latest in our industry, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day, everyone. We'll continue to answer questions after the live session ends in the chat.